All right. I am back. As you can see, I haven't done this in a while, and I'm encountering several different problems. So I had to iron them out. But it looks like it seems to be running okay. I'm now connected via cable as well to the internet. So I hope that the rest of the stream will go without too many hiccups. And without much further ado, let's start. So basically, maybe yesterday or 2 days ago, I went to photograph a property. The owner actually has done quite a few different changes, put in some new furniture and so on. Anyway, the property looked pretty decent, pretty nice. And as I walked in, I thought I'm going to actually try and take several different shots of this bedroom, or rather one shot, but with different frames. Now, for the purposes of this stream, I basically applied some settings to all the photographs. I've already selected the ones I'm going to use, and I've actually opened it in Photoshop already, just to kind of not to waste too much time. So what I want to do today is basically show you how I blend different frames. And as you can see on the screen, we have the ambient frame here. That's the dark one with the lights on. And I took 5 brackets for each, but I've selected 3 that I'm going to use. And to be honest, probably I'll use 2 while I'm editing this stuff in Photoshop, but we will see. Just for the time being, I selected 3 of them. Then if we go here, marked with red, I've put the ambient layer with natural light only. So obviously the lights are off. And as you can see, much different vibe than with the lights on. Next, I did actually a window pull. So I've got a window frame, and that's mainly just because, as you can see, there's wooden slacks on the door here. Sorry, not the door, the window. And they're quite difficult or annoying to try and cut out. So I took a window pull, and to be honest, I'm not even sure if we really need it. It's not like the view outside is, amazing. And then we have our flash shots. So the ones marked with green here, as you can probably tell, I've left the lights on. So the lights are on. My computer seems to be struggling today. It's taking a while even just to load up the shots, which is a little bit weird, but anyway. Yeah, so these are with the lights on, and then I have the one without the lights. So what I want to do is jump into Photoshop and show you how I would blend these. So we're going to have a few different photos at the end. And just let me jump into the develop module. And just to give you a quick rundown roughly on the settings I've used. So for the profile, I've used the camera neutral, sorry. I'm using the Sony a7 IV at the moment. And then for settings, very, very typical. I've actually dropped the exposure a little bit on some of the photographs that were a bit too bright. But, that's a very kind of standard layout, dropping highlights, raising shadows a little bit. I didn't even raise them too much. Whites the same, and then dropping blacks a little bit. I didn't even touch any of the presence. Nothing with the colors, no denoise. I've increased sharpening roughly to around 60, and then I use masking somewhere between 60 and 80 typically at the moment. And then I removed chromatic aberration, and then enable profile corrections are actually on by default whenever I import the photographs. So in terms of the basic edits, that's roughly what it is. They will slightly vary between each photograph, more or less. As you can see, some of them have exposure just slightly adjusted. Some of them much more than the others. But in general, that's basically what the frames we're going to use. So let me close the Lightroom, and we're now in Photoshop. And I've actually grouped things here as well. So at the top, we have our ambient frames. And I actually have some actions that I use for real estate, quite fast actions. If I'm in a pinch, I use them quite a bit. So we're going to use that basically to blend these three. Then I have a window pull, which I put basically in a group. Lights on, that's those 3 frames here. We're starting at the top, we have the brightest one and it goes down to the darkest. And then we have strobe with lights on, and then strobes with lights off. Excuse me, I had to grab a sip of water. So what I like to do to begin is get my flash frames first. And now this is a very weird bug here. I think we dropped the opacity, yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do is blend the lights off first. And once that's done, I'll probably flatten the layer so I don't have to deal with a big file here. Now, one thing I didn't really use, I think, let me just check. Yeah, I didn't take a frame, which is very typical for flambient shots, behind the camera. And I didn't really use it for the reason that the floor there was quite wobbly. So as I was standing behind the camera, it was actually tilted and was causing obviously misalignment between other frames. And since I'm using so many different frames in this particular shot here, I know it's going to be pain in the bum trying to align these together. So I basically decided not to use the frame from behind the camera. So okay, let's I'm gonna start actually with blending these first, so we can figure out which kind of frame. I think probably this one I'm gonna use as my main, so I'm just gonna drop it at the bottom, and as you can see, I removed the visibility of other layers. And why I chose this one, when I lower my flash, the lower I get, the light bounces, and then the shadows are typically softer. So, you know, here is not super soft because we're creating some shadows because the flash is very low. But if you look at the main one here, it's quite soft. If you compare to this one, where the flash is now higher, it is quite more defined here. So it's really your preference, but I'm going to use this one. I'm not even sure if we need that particular one. So here, obviously I'm on the right hand side, so I'm gonna use the left hand of the frame here, or left side of the frame here. So I've added a black mask and I'm just painting over. My flow is at 20%. And that looks all right. Now I'm going to look for the one where I'm on the left side here, so we can fill the right side of the frame. So again, I'm using the black mask and then blending. And usually when I do that, I like to think about how the natural light flows. So we have the window here, obviously it goes through here. So you would think, for example, if you look at the cabinet here, that's going to be lit up, and the area that's here it should be in the shadow. So I'm kind of trying to follow more or less laws of physics of how the light travels, and keep it more or less natural as much as I can. So I don't remember. Let's have a look at this frame here. So really, there's no shadow coming from underneath the cabinets. So that's what I was kind of contemplating. I kind of like how this creates the shadow on the bed frame here. So I'm going to use that just to paint it in. But I'm going to leave the top as it is. Okay, so this frame here, as you can see, I've lowered it quite a bit, and we've lit up this area under the cabinet, which if we go back to natural light frame, as you can see, it's also very, very similar. So that's what I'm going to use under the cabinets here to get rid of that shadow. And we have obviously some kind of weird shadows going on here. As you can see, the room was quite small. So we have these problems. So they might be solved later on by using the ambient layer. We'll see how it goes. Otherwise, we can always try and use something like, what do you call it? The clone stamp, or yeah, any of those tools, like remove tool should be good as well for that if we need. All right. So now we have this frame here. It's very similar to the one as I would do it from behind the camera. It's just a little bit to the right hand side. And looking at it, we don't really need much here from that frame because, you know, the light is coming from the window. If we use that, it kind of flattens it. But what I can see is we are getting rid of that shadow here. So if I turn it off, you can see there's the shadow generated by the flash when I was on the left side of the room. If I turn it on, it's gone. So I'm just going to add black mask, and obviously you are probably aware, but I'm pressing Alt on my keyboard and clicking the mask here. I also have my own keyboard shortcut to do that. And I'm going to paint this in, and we're removing that shadow. So it's much easier to later on add those shadows using the natural light frame. Please don't look at my face here. And this one was to light up the stuff, the room, or the entrance to the room in the mirror. And this is, to be honest, is quite optional. Like, we don't really need it. Again, if you want, we can light up the little desk here, which is going to make it a little bit flatter, but really depends on what kind of look you're going for. So I might just dab a little bit, so it's still kind of darker, but we're just brightening it up a little bit. All right, that looks decent. There's a little bit of a hot spot here, so I'm just gonna paint it in. So if I go before, you can see it's a little bit brighter. So that's why I've blended that in. And the last frame here is for the room in the back. Let's try lighten mode here. It's not ideal. It kind of changes the colors a little bit. So I'm just going to use screen. It blends actually pretty well. We don't really need to cut out anything. So I'm just going to blend it this way. Now again, we've got my camera here. I do have a frame, as I said, that actually I took a frame of the hallway that kind of sees this area here a little bit. So later on, I can probably use that to replace that, but for the purposes of this video, we're not going to deal with that now. Okay, so this is the strobe a photo without the lights, and I'm still kind of looking at this area near the window, and I think it's still a little bit bright, so I'm just gonna dab a few more times. And we're now introducing the shadow if I do it too much, so I'll leave it like that. And I think I'm going to flatten it, but just before I do, I'm just going to have a quick look if there's no area in the photo here where I'm actually still appearing in it, because I don't want to deal with that later on using removal tools. Okay, I think it looks decent. Control E, that's going to turn my group into one layer. And let's move on to the strobe. So at the moment, we're building all the frames that we're going to use for blending. Obviously, when you photograph, you can decide if you want to use strobe with lights on or with lights off, and you just do it throughout the whole process. This is really for the purposes of kind of showing you how different the frames look and how to blend these together. In any case, let's now work on the one with the lights on. And if I remember correctly, as you can see already, the colors are much different. I think I haven't fixed the white balance here, so I don't really want to. I think I might need to go back to Lightroom. Give me 1 second. Obviously, the white balance will be a little bit different anyway because we have the lights on. Usually flash negates it quite a bit, especially if you increase the shutter speed. All right, let me just use the 5-star ones. Yeah, that's left as shot, so that's not ideal. Yeah, so that color looks much better. All right, so that gives us roughly 5.1 plus 23. Let's see on the other ones. 5.125. So we're close. We could probably use the same numbers, but I'm just gonna roughly click on these and really depends how where you are located and how the light travels. So some of them need different adjustments. But yeah, more or less we're where we're supposed to be now. Let me zoom in here, and I'm also going to adjust that. So that one seems fine anyway. So what I'm going to do now is I will open these as layers in Photoshop, and as they do, let me just change it to the slideshow. It's gonna slow down the stream a little bit as it's loading up all those files and changing them into TIFF file. Okay, so we've loaded those frames. Now what I'm going to do, let's group these together. And I've made a shortcut. I think you can right click on it and go to duplicate group. And then in destination, we're going to select the document here, the first one. So it's going to just put it in the other document. So now I can close that, and that group has been added here. So I'm just going to remove these files, and let's grab those, put it inside here. And now we have the correct white balance. Okay, that was a bit unnecessary, but anyway. Okay, we don't really have some frames that we had on the previous one, so I'm going to use this one as my main one. Again, just going to add a mask. Sorry, the opacity has changed to 10%, so I usually keep opacity at 100 and then flow typically at 20. Sometimes I drop it to lower, depending on the situation, sometimes higher, so that's really dependent. If you shift click on the mask, you can turn it on and off, and you can see if there's some areas that you like and some areas that you don't like. So you can see now my face is appearing here, so I'm just going to remove myself. And now let's do the left side. Very similar process. So I'm trying to lighten the area around the window frames. Obviously, if the light's coming through there, those frames are going to be brighter. And okay, we've got 2 frames here. So I'm going to use that to tame a little bit of the wall here, so it's not as strong. And then this one here is supposed to be for the area in the mirror, but to be honest, it's not super necessary, I think. You know, it should be a little bit darker there, but I'm going to add just a little bit of it to kind of fill it up. And this is unfortunately a bit bright, so I'm going to paint it away. You kind of really want to create bright and dark area. So if you have the front door of that cabinet here or the wardrobe, the side is darker, and that basically creates that dimensionality and gets rid of the flat look. All right, so the last one again here is the room in the back, and I'm going to, as with the previous one, change it to screen. We're going to zoom in, and I'm going to gently paint it in. I'm not too bothered about it, but for the purposes of this being a real estate photo shoot, we want to show that there is, you know, nice area there, and that they have some painting and a nice light and so on. So I think that's about it. We want to kind of compare these. So in a way, they look similar. We've got a little bit problem with the strobe here, so we've lost some data here. We're going to have to deal with that using the natural light, or what we can do is, so I'm just going to press Control E to duplicate this one, Control J to copy it, use the mask, and I'm just going to paint the other frame on top here, so this one has a little bit more info, so not everything is lost. And since the white balance is matching more or less, that looks decent enough. So now I can select those two and then merge them together. So we have lights on, lights off. Funnily enough, this one has more shadows because obviously the lights, like the top light, generates some shadow underneath the cabinet here and so on. So it is a different vibe. All right, so lights on we're going to leave for later, and the same with window pull. But before we do that, let me go to the natural light, and I think let me copy these so we have a copy just in case if we need it later on. Because what I'm going to do, I actually have a set of actions that I use. I'm actually going to do a video about it. It's mainly for the real estate editing. So it's here, if you look at the window, I have sky replacement. So there's sky replacement, TV replacement with a black screen, selective color. I've got something that will align the layers, something that will create luminosity channels and then delete luminosity channels. I'm sure you've came across, if you make any new channels or if you do a selection and save it into a new channel, if you save then the file as a TIFF document or any other document with layers, I'm sure you'll notice the preview always looks very weird. You have like a white image with a little mask or something like that, and it's caused by basically those extra channels. So I do have an action that deletes the channels. Once I use whatever I need to do, then I can delete it. Then simple, something that will add luminosity curves, and makes auto adjustments, but those adjustments I think are actually super outdated, so they're not going to look very good. Something that will add a color layer and so on. And then I have for actually blending flash as well here. As you can see, here is 1A/1F, which means one ambient frame, one flash frame. So it blends those two. And then you have one ambient with 2 flash frames, one ambient and 3 flash frames. These are the most typical kind of flash setups. And then you have, for example, 3 ambients, 1 flash, or 3 ambients and 3 flash. Anyway, I'm going to make a video about these and get these available to download at some point as well. But what I'm looking for is my 3 bracket blend. And again, I've created many different ones here. So if you look, it says 3 bracket blend. So obviously that's going to blend 3 brackets. And then you have DMB, which basically stands for dark, medium, bright. So this tells you in which order your frames have to be from the top to the bottom for this action to work. So if your camera shoots, let's say from maybe medium, dark brown, that's quite dark bright, that's quite popular, then you have this blend here. So what I'm going to do is use DMB because we have it set up as dark, medium, and bright. So let me run this one. And this is normally just a starting point. So as you can see, it created different masks for the exposures, and then also creates a little file with luminosity channels for midtones, dark and bright areas. So you can adjust that on top of that. Like looking at that file. So let's put group 1. Let's use the medium. And then if I put these on, you can see that it's much more flatter. You do have to use curves normally to add some contrast and also selectively maybe remove some of the stuff. So the bright exposure seems decent. So the dark exposure actually is way working too much here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the group, and then I'm going to add the white mask, or actually let's invert that. And then I'm just going to paint it in the window a little bit. We don't need, I just want some of the areas appear a little bit, but I don't want it to be too flat. So I think that already looks decent, better than that. As you can see, that actually affected many areas and made it much more flat. And by selectively just choosing the window, we have a little bit of a better situation. Now, there are some problems here, but I don't want to get into them. Like, I would remove that darker area here. But for the purposes of this video, let's assume that this is okay. If I go into luminosity curves, again, let me just remove myself actually. And let's go here. I can, just work, let's say, on the midtones if I want. So again, most of the time you want to add contrast, because I always thought the concept of doing brackets and HDR is a little bit of a weird one, because it's almost like you're trying to get highlights, like the whites, bright areas, and pull them down to midtones, and then do the same with the shadows, put it into midtones, and then the whole image is just becoming like one big midtone and super flat. So I always thought that's not the greatest look. I don't want to spend too much here, but obviously, these curves allow you to kind of adjust the stuff. Same for the brights here. I don't want to pull it down too much because we need the contrast. So this is without luminosity curves, and then with luminosity curves. Obviously, you could just create curves here manually and just attach them, or I forgot the name of the function here, but basically clip. You can clip them directly to each one and then work on those as you want. So it's funny because if you turn it on and off, you kind of realize how different these are. But yeah, anyway, I'm just going to group that. I don't think I need the backup of those ambient layers, so I'm just going to get rid of it. I'm going to rename it to natural light. And why not? I'm just going to merge it. Went into the lights on folder by mistake. Okay. So now we have our basic ingredient for Flambient, so we can mix our natural light layer with the strobe layer. The problem we're going to have, so if we change this to luminosity, as you can see, the layer underneath is the one with the light, but our natural layer doesn't have the light. So that's a little bit of a problem, and there's a few ways of dealing with it. We could just use these and copy them, let's say, to the top. Let's reverse the order, and I'm going to run the action. But the problem is that these are not correct brackets to run this type of... oops, sorry, I cannot select all of them. The way I've edited those 3 frames with the lights on, they're not the best. As you can see, it's super dark. But we can quickly make a couple adjustments here. So let's increase the midtones, dark curves. Let's go down here a little bit, and then again add a little bit of contrast. And brights, actually we're going to increase the brights as well. So let's call it lights on, ambient lights on. Okay. So now in theory we could change this to luminosity, and now because the lights are on both, we could just simply mix them together. So you can just work on opacity. That's very good way of doing it. The other option, as always, is that you can just put a black mask and then you can go selectively into the areas that you want to. Give me 1 second, opacity dropped again. Yeah, so you could basically manually decide where you want to add the luminosity layer. So these are two options. Let's delete that at the moment. I'm going to change the natural light back to normal mode. And now we're going to work on the lights layer. So if we want to add lights to a natural light blend, it could actually be better if we do some of the adjustments we might need to do. So this is where, for example, I would create hue saturation, then use the color range tool and desaturate, not really desaturate, but drop some of the color contamination in the areas where I don't want it. So for example, I'm just going to try and do it fast. I'm not going to be super crazy with it. So let's look at the areas that in theory should be white. And as typically, I have localized color clusters switched on, so that enables or makes it possible so that when I select, it only selects the area around where I'm selecting. I think that's pretty okay. I'm not going to deal with it too much. Now, what I typically like to do myself is go into separate colors. You can obviously just literally just desaturate this way. But a lot of stuff is selected here, so we'll have to do a little bit of masking. Now, for my lens here, that's 12 to 24 millimeter. This one is annoying in a sense that it's bulbous lens, and the way the light comes in, I get a lot of green and kind of maybe like aqua color coming in. So I typically have to deal with these quite a lot. So the way I like to remove the casts is obviously move everything to the right 100% and see what is being affected. And then I can decide how much I want to pull back. And again, so this aqua and green, they always appear in the corners for me, just the way I think the light enters into the lens. Okay, it's not too bad. For yellows and reds, I usually don't typically like to go too crazy on this. Drop it maybe 20%. If I turn it on and off, there's a little bit of a change. Now, obviously, we don't want to leave it like that because it is affecting the walls, and the walls are not gray. So let's add this hue saturation into a group. I'm going to add black mask. I'm just going to use polygonal lasso tool and do a quick selection. I'm going to include the cabinets in this. And I'm going to be a little bit quick with this stuff. And by the way, as usual, I'm using the pen and the tablet. So for me, it's quite fast to make these selections. And the good thing is that we're not desaturating everything like super crazy. So even if we select some areas that we don't really want, they won't be affected too much, which is good. All right. So now I'm going to press Alt backspace, and that fills the selected area. All right. So this ambient lights on I'm going to leave for the time being, and let's have a look at our lights here. So when I deal with frames like that, I usually have one frame that's darker where I can look more into the details of the light in the fixtures. And then there's usually the bright one, which would be this one, which I use as a luminosity. So obviously the light generated by these lamps creates light around it. And this is what I want to use for that purpose. Now, I do like that the lights are yellow. I think a lot of people don't like it for some reason, but you know, that's the color that the lights were when I took the photograph. So I like to keep it. And the first option here is we can use the lighten mode. And if you look at it, it's got some trouble here. I think usually the areas of change from bright to dark are causing some weird light problems. And there are some ways of dealing with it. So if I zoom in here, you can see we have a little bit of kind of like this red or maybe purple color. So if you put it in the lighten mode like this, and you have those type of problems, I do have a brighter layer, which if it's going to be brighter, it's going to work a little bit better. So you see it's adding more stuff in here. So now the light itself, the colors are much better in a way, but the light that it casts onto the wall looks quite bad. It's basically red and orange. So there's one way of dealing with it is we can add curves layer and clip it here. And if we raise basically midtones most of the time, really, that kind of starts fixing these a little bit. Now, they're not perfect. And probably if I were to use that, what I would do is put it inside a group, add a black mask, and then just paint in what I want. So let's say I want just the light and a little bit kind of maybe around it. Doesn't have to be much, to be honest. And then you could add luminosity on top of that to add the light it creates. And this one doesn't really have much of a color cast anymore. Now you might need to play with it. So again, you might need to add curves, for example, and raise it up or down, depending, you know, on how the scene is. There's no universal way of doing that. But let me delete this layer mask. Let's turn it off, and let's actually delete this layer mask as well. I'm going to remove it. Now, the second way of dealing with the stuff is something actually we've used already, which is putting it into a screen mode. And that kind of is opposite. So if you want to, as you can see, it usually screen mode will affect the whole image. So pretty much everything is affected. But if you look at the way it blends that light, it is most of the time much better. Now, there are occasions where lighten mode will be better for you. So you would need to see which one works better for you in the situation you're in. But there are basically those two ways that you can deal with it quite easy. Now again, we can add curves, and it's opposite process of the lighten layer where we raised the midtones. Here we usually drop the stuff, so to kind of constrict it a little bit more, and then you can add a little bit more highlights so that the light itself is a little bit brighter. So let's see what we prefer. Probably actually we don't need to do much at all here. Almost, it looks almost fine with just with the, yeah, I think even without the curves, we don't really need the curves here. So that already looks decent. Now, depending on if you like this stuff or not, we have those lights here. So let me go back to the curves, and if I turn these on, I think these work better on these lights here. So probably what I'm going to do is invert this one to start with, and I will, the reason why I'm inverting that curves layer is that I'm going to use it later on just on those lights here, just so I can, because the brightness levels, I guess, between them are different. So I do want to use curves, but only on this one, but not on this light. This to me actually looks pretty decent as it is. It looks pretty natural. So I'm going to add a black mask, and let's paint in the light. Now again, depending on if you like the yellow color, you can paint it in as it is here. Or if you don't like the color, you just paint the light itself. So do I have a selection? What's going on here? Don't know why the opacity keeps dropping now for me all the time. But okay, anyway, you can basically remove the background and then paint it only in the bulb itself, and maybe just a little bit around it. And again, like with the previous one, you just add the luminosity layer, which is the brighter one, and then you add it on top here. Okay, now for the purposes of my preference here is I do actually prefer the yellow around it. So I'm just going to add it on. I think it looks more natural. There was the light here as well, which is covered. So again, looking at it, you don't really need it, but then if you want to indicate that the light is there, you can add a little bit of it. We do the same with this light here. And this one here. Okay, this one's quite strong, so I'm just going to remove a little bit, but I do want the inside of the lamp to be white. I don't want it to be gray because that doesn't look natural. And then if you want to work on this particular one on its own, I'm just going to paint in that curves. So at the moment, here we go. I think we can add way more contrast here. So that's basically, you're looking for that balance that you're happy with. Okay, so let's look at that luminosity here. I think we're going to have to add curves, clip it, and raise it if we want to use it. I almost think it's better not to use the luminosity layer. The lights create those, they're quite distracting, those rays from the crystals, I guess. I think to me they're a bit distracting. I don't really like them, but again, it's up to you. You can add it on. So if we want, we can just add a little bit of that into here, into these lights. Okay, I'm going to remove that. Right, so we have the lights which we can switch on or off. And you can make further adjustment to kind of refine it. Sometimes if you're not happy with the color, we can add, maybe this should be to the whole group, hue saturation. Let's clip it. The problem is this error in Photoshop is super annoying. So sometimes when you're using hue saturation, it messes up and your properties disappear. Now there's kind of a way around it. You can just drop it on the bottom and now it appears, but obviously you won't see the changes it makes. But let's say we have the yellows and we want them to be a little bit more orange. We can move this slider a little bit and then you can see, because this yellow is going a little bit into kind of greenish for me, for my liking. So we can add that. I feel like it's a little bit too much. So instead of dropping it down again to see the sliders, I'm just gonna drop opacity to 50%. And okay, so that changes it a little bit. Can put these together. The only problem we have right now is the light up above. We've caused some kind of problem here, and I'm not sure why. All right, this is the, okay. We have this one that was messed up, so I'm not sure where it's coming from. this one is in screen mode. And this is the luminosity. But I think we can use that extra frame here to kind of blend it a little bit better. So I'm just going to do that. I think it's a little bit on the darker side. That's probably why. So let's add curves to this one as well. And we can play with opacity of that as well, just to kind of dial it in the way you think it looks decent enough. So I'll leave it maybe around 70% here. And I don't want to spend too much time on this, so I'm just going to leave it like that. Let's call it lights. So we have the lights here. So this can be, oops. All right, this is the ceiling hue saturation. So in theory, this could be one of the shots. So I'm just going to copy natural light. So, yeah. I have natural lights on. Then just natural lights on. And then we can use natural light again. So I'm going to copy, actually I don't need this one to be honest, because the strobe above is with the lights on, so they won't match. So let's switch the natural light layer to luminosity. This is at 100%. It's doing pretty good job. I don't think we need to actually do much masking here. I'm not even dropping the opacity too much, just to make it look more natural. Let's add curves, which I always like to do, and clip it to that natural light layer. And then we can do a little bit of further adjustment. So that's going to be our strobe without the lights. Now we have the strobe with the lights. For that purposes, I'm actually going to use that ambient with the lights on that we blended before. It's a bit on the dark side, so I'm just going to use curves. Let's group it. I don't even feel like we need to selectively add the luminosity. So I'm just going to drop the opacity. The only thing I'm not a fan of is these things here. So I'm just going to slightly remove them just to avoid that. To me, it's a bit more distracting that way. So we've got strobe and natural light blend here without the lights. Strobe and lights on blend. Then we have the natural light. And then natural light with the lights on. And I think we probably want to... I'm going to drop hue saturation here a little bit. Maybe something like that, so it's not too bright. And that's, to be honest, that's it really. We could have a look at the window pool. Already not liking the look. I prefer the little bit of a blown out look on these, to be honest. Delete that. Yeah. I'm kind of torn a little bit here, but I think for the purposes of this video, it's not about adding the window pull. And it's a bit late now, so I think I'm just gonna leave it like that. Right. Yeah, I would say constantly go on into the natural light blend. So the strobe one on its own looks pretty decent. The outside is a little bit too dark. So in that case, what you can do as well is just put a mask on that, and then we can add the light more into the window, and then add a little bit of the luminosity blend, so it doesn't affect it too much, but the windows are getting blown out a little bit more. This one is very similar. I could put this one in luminosity mode as well and blow it out a little bit as well. Now this one to me feels like it's a bit too much. There's more blooming being introduced because of that. Okay. I think, to be honest, that's pretty much it. So you can turn the lights on and off. And then you can see the difference between the lights on strobe and lights off. And a lot of time, I mean, depends on the property, but a lot of times I do prefer lights off, especially if you have a nice weather outside and if you have good lighting coming in, providing some nice shadows and so on. So this was overcast day. As you can see, there's nothing really coming through in terms of sun. But with those slats, what I do like is the pattern you can get from the sun coming through them. But in this case, there was nothing there really. So okay, let me just so we have this TV here. I do have actually a little action for blocking out the TV, so I'm just going to add a simple mask to the TV. And if I go to my actions, and let's scroll to the top, there's black screen TV. So if I press play, it runs the whole thing, leaves you a little message here on what you need to do. You press stop. Now this one, oops, this one has messed up here a little bit. But typically what I do, you find the source of light. So let's say it's coming from the window here and the TV, and then you can kind of move the border which blends white with the black, and find a spot that you kind of like. Now this action was stopped, so what you do is you press play and it's going to rasterize it, and then you add noise, and I typically like to keep it around 1.5. We can kind of move on here to see how the noise looks. So we want it to kind of match the rest of the image. So I think in this case actually 1 looks decent, and that's the TV screen here. And then if you want, you can just drop opacity a little bit if you want to have a little bit more of natural look as well. And then if we keep that on top, that's basically it. So that's pretty much it in terms of editing this one, I think. Once again, we have natural light with the strobe, no lights. Then we have strobe with the lights on and ambient with the lights on. Again, the ambient we used wasn't properly blended as well, so it's not super crazy nice blend, but it's decent. And then you have natural light. And to be honest, again, with natural light, I haven't done much editing at all. There's a lot of stuff, obviously, that could be fixed and we could work on the windows. But again, I just wanted to show you how I deal with adding lights on if you have them on separate layers. With the, as you go along, okay, I'll just put it a little bit of a problem here. So as you can see, there's darkening here causing by this one. So I'm just going to add white layer mask, and I'm going to just quickly go around to kind of remove that. Need to remove that here. Okay, it's a little bit better. But yeah, these are basically techniques I normally use for the lights. It's definitely not something you would use on real estate photos. Really, in my opinion, now real estate is all about either editor or getting the AI to edit the photographs. The very typical real estate look has dominated, I think, real estate everywhere. So it's I don't think it's worth it trying to waste time and provide these type of photos where you spend time editing, because the brackets edited by an editor or AI is going to be way like good enough for real estate agent, and you save time. It's very cheap. It's probably costs less than it would cost you to do it personally. And I believe that probably pricing will go down a little bit, because it's again, it's much of an easier barrier if you want to go into real estate photography. And I think a lot of people, to get clients, will be maybe offering lower pricing to get the clients. So anyway, these are a couple of my thoughts on the topic. I probably should do a little bit of a talk about it, because there's been quite a big of a shift, like literally since last year, like a lot of things changed. So yeah, this is more for stuff if you're editing something for architecture, interior design, builders, maybe stuff like that. That's where you can use this technique. It's good to know how to edit your own photographs anyway. All right, I'm gonna go. It's been nice being back. I didn't have anything prepared at all for myself to, do here, so it was very off the cuff. If you guys have any questions or maybe requests on what you would like to see me editing, I'll be happy to help if I can. And I do have, I think, 2 or 3 videos where I went to shoot a property and I shot it with, I think, 2 of them with a flash, where I go over different things on site, how I think about things. Very similar to one of the videos I did already, but one of the viewers wanted to see me doing something in a property where you have the furniture. So one of them is that, and yeah, I have one that's probably more of like an HDR versus flash. And again, a lot of times when it comes to real estate, I really do think it's much better and much easier now to hire an editor or use AI editor for your photos. It's good enough. You don't have to waste too much time on site. And it is what it is. If you're a photographer that does it for your own passion, then I think getting into something like architecture, interior, maybe something like furniture, appliances, that's probably the way to go, because I think real estate has gone quite a bit into one specific type of photograph. So if you look at photographs now, they're all edited in the same way. And personally, I'm not a big fan of it. And probably if you are a photographer, you're probably not a fan of it as well. But it's a good, fast way of making money, cheap, easy. And it became much, much easier using AI now as well. All right, anyway, that's it from me for tonight. It's almost 1 o'clock here, so it's time for me to get some sleep. Thanks for watching. Sorry for a bit of a rumble here.